Who cares? I mean, it's a detail. It's a detail. I spoke to him. I'll speak to him again when it matters. I look forward to speaking to the President soon, but I don't have a burning issue to speak with the President about right now. When America wants to come back and have the discussions on the trade side, we will have those discussions.
A few days ago, he was asked about the state of those negotiations, and he said there are no issues of importance to discuss. In fact, he said, who cares? Mr. Speaker, we care. We care about the workers who've lost their jobs and don't have paychecks to make their mortgage payments. Why doesn't he care?
Okay, since the Prime Minister made those comments, his office has also confirmed that Carney is considering a trip to Washington next week. Brad, how do you interpret what the Prime Minister said there in South Africa? It is being characterized as indifferent, maybe, to the consequence of this, or defenders of the Prime Minister today were telling me he's like not wanting to look desperate in terms of like dealing with Donald Trump, playing it cool. What do you make of what we saw and heard there?
Or a third option could be that international travel really takes it out on anybody. No, it's fair enough. I mean, he did come across a little short there, and we saw glimpses of that. I think in the election campaign as well. So I don't want to dismiss the notion that flying to the Middle East and then on to South Africa takes a toll on somebody, and same questions over and over again. And again, the Prime Minister is not, decades into this industry. But the notion is that there isn't anything to say. I'm sure he'd go back and say, maybe I shouldn't have said those. Who cares? Because it gives Poilievre, a little bit of theater in question period, and we all know, what that's worth. It's good for the clips from the.
A little theater goes a long
tonight,
way, it seems.
But it doesn't have a long runway for that. But ultimately, I think of course, I don't think that the Prime Minister stopped caring about the auto sector just because he said who cares, but the notion that they haven't spoken. What's interesting is, though, is in the past, there was a whole bunch of communication that we didn't know about between the Prime Minister and the President, and now, of course, when that's revealed, everyone wants to know when the last correspondent was. I don't think it provides any keen insight into either the Prime Minister's game plan as for the approach with the Americans, or I'm sure when Trump speaks to Mr. Carney, he'll let us know, because he's in our feeds every hour.
Yeah, well, I get the sense, Rob, there's pretty frequent communication, even going back and forth between the President and the Prime Minister. And when he says who cares, it's like, stop putting weight on every interaction or overreact. Who knows, right? Like being asked about Donald Trump, we have to deal with that. Like, just because the President says something doesn't mean it means anything. It's these sorts of weird challenges. I don't know what that means, but it creates a murkiness about this big trade thing while he's also trying to do India and the U.A.E. and all these other deals.
One of the things reporters tend to like about Mr. Carney is that he'll give you a faithful answer to a well-put question. One of the reasons why we like that is because sometimes he tells us what's really on his mind, and I think what was really on his mind there is frustration. I don't think that he was clearly piqued, vexed, not necessarily solely by the question. The truth is, both the President and the Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador Hoekstra, have said that there's nothing to talk about until at least U.S. Thanksgiving. So they're putting him on ice.
That's Thursday.
They're putting Canada on ice. Now, who cares? Well, we know he cares. Why do we know that? Because short of pitching a tent in Lafayette Park, right across the street from the White House, he had his trade minister and his clerk of the Privy Council and often his chief of staff down there 5-6 days a week for months and months on end. So clearly he cares. Clearly he cares, and clearly he wants a deal. So I think that there's some frustration. I think we should consider ourselves fortunate up until now that President Trump hasn't put on the extra 10% that he said he was going to put on when he had his little fit of pique. But I think the Prime Minister really does care, and I think that he should care because our economy is showing some resilience, but the uncertainty is still hurting investment.
Right, but
he knows that.
But to be clear, Kate, the who cares was in response to a question of when did you last speak to Donald Trump, right? Like, and he doesn't want to get. We don't get readouts every time there's a conversation anymore. There's just a difference in the communication style of this. So it's that as opposed to the trade agreement. But you know, it is stalled. There are challenges. He's engaging with India. He went to the U.A.E, and this comes with its own criticisms. But there's a very clear, deliberate, simultaneous strategy to pivot away from the U.S. While also not looking needy to the U.S.
And that would have been the direction to take the question, right? You know, of course we have our challenges with the United States. I am here forming new relationships and new opportunities, and the Prime Minister didn't do that. The man is not Joe Biden. He runs marathons regularly. I am not keen to give him a pass on a grueling international travel schedule, which he undertakes himself.
Brad's too soft, is what you're saying.
You said it, not me.
Well, maybe you should be giving him media training. That was a very good answer.
I'm not sure that would be welcome, but. No, I think that it might not just be a glib off the cuff comment. I think that the government has been trying to create a little bit of distance with those negotiations. You can understand why the media would be asking questions all the time. The entire last election was about this issue. It was the Prime Minister that raised the stakes on this issue in terms of his ability to manage it. So you can understand why a reporter might ask, hey, how's it going on Canada-U.S. trade relations? But I think that there might be a little bit too much Kool-Aid drinking over at 80 Wellington Street with respect to what makes a good soundbite in the moment and what's going to play with the boomer base and that dismissive tone, which we also saw in a question from a female, not a reporter, but a host about pipelines. Pipelines are boring. I think that there's a pattern of dismissiveness here, and I'm not sure that it's entirely just, again, an off-the-cuff remark. I think that's intentional.
Pipelines can't be that boring if you're going to sign an MOU with the Premier of Alberta about
his first response. My comment is his first response when he's backed into a corner is snark.
Look, I hear you, but it clearly, I mean, they've been engaged on it, right? So they obviously don't find it boring. They've been working on it. They're going to spend political capital on it.
How about
right?
saying
so
I look forward to sharing more news on that soon.
Right. So Vandana, on this, I mean, is this just glib comms there, or does he really just want us to stop asking about the U.S. and focus on the $70 billion from the U.A.E. and reopening trade talks with Narendra Modi?
I think we're overthinking this. I think really it is that. I think he wanted to talk, and I've seen other leaders, ministers, prime ministers do this. Like, he wanted to talk about the G20, he wanted to talk about good work, and the question comes up, right? And he's been traveling, so he wanted to talk about all the other items. I don't think it means he doesn't care. Of course he cares. I think also he's careful with his tone. Like, he doesn't want Canada to look desperate. He wants to make sure he's a tough negotiator and keeps to that line. And he doesn't want to beg for anything. He's going to be like, listen, in the meantime, we have a deal with the U.A.E. You know, Sweden wants to do business with us. We have Indonesia. Look at what's happening with India. There's a lot of options here. So look at this great work. So I think that was more of what it is. I don't think there was anything. Right. I wouldn't put any weight to what he commented on in terms of who cares.
Right. Look, and just to follow up there, Vandana, I get the real politics that, you know, if the U.S. is becoming difficult, you need to look elsewhere. But those elsewheres are also difficult. India, right at the top of the list, right? The U.A.E. and its, you know, alleged funding of militias in Sudan. I mean, there was a vote here in Ottawa on Sunday by the Khalistanis, you know, and by Sikh dissidents on independence from India. I mean, how do you calibrate that? What's the message to communities that are still receiving warnings that they are in danger, that Narendra Modi, there's going to be another trip to India by the Liberal government in 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Canadians need to feel first and foremost that they are safe here and that their laws will protect them and their state will protect them. And as a minority in India as well, I totally understand that. Like, I need to feel safe no matter what I feel about whatever's happening in India, about in my own home and my family, right? So I understand that completely. But I think what I've noticed, and I read a lot of the readouts as well as the articles, he made it focused on business deals. He talked about a trade partnership. In the past, under Trudeau and before, we talked about shared values a lot.
Right.
That language is nowhere to be found these days. It's focused solely on business, and I think that's what we have to do. I think, unfortunately, you know, while we hope that everyone shares our values, I mean, some people argue that the current administration down south doesn't always share our exact same values, and you're not going to get that in international diplomacy. So I think really what this is a business relationship, and no matter who you deal with, because allies can shift. you still have to make sure you're protecting people from foreign interference and be guarded against that and make Canadians safe. So I think there's still a lot of steps on that, and I understand people want to be able to advocate for what they feel and feel safe doing so. But I think he has been clear that this is just a business relationship.
Right.
And I'll say one other thing. I was at a South Asian gala just last week, and I was sitting with a whole bunch of South Asian media, in-language media, and I asked them, like, do people are concerned about India? And they said to me, all their audience is concerned of India, but they also want a relationship with India because they either have family there, they themselves do business there. So it's more like, you got to do it. So let's be our eyes wide open to what is happening there, and we should do that with every state that we deal with. But it doesn't mean we can't have a business partnership that can benefit our economy.
But Brad, I mean, like the real politics of that, I get it, right? But just going back to sort of the political dynamic of it all, a pipeline arrangement with Alberta, your seats in the Vancouver Metro proper is going to be a bit of an issue, and this with like south of the Fraser River, you know, Burnaby, Surrey, those areas, another potential challenge as you seek to normalize things with India.
You know, it reminds me of, especially with Vandana's just her last comments there. You know, it takes me back to when Chrétien was Prime Minister and he was taking Team Canada to China, and it was this notion of the way it was expressed was, you know, we're using trade as a form of engagement in order to then follow up with the values. Whereas under the Trudeau regime, it was values first and isolationism for those that maybe didn't practice that. For Carney, it's not an exporting of values, it's an exporting of Canadian goods, and the values take a back seat to that. So it's just a fundamentally different way to look at trade. Are we doing trade with a particular partner in order to spread democracy or Western values, or is it to sell the goods and services that Canadians need to sell now that our big trading partners is closing the doors on us? That's what I think the conversation, and again, I don't think he's overly political about this. I think it's more transactional.